The murder trial of Theodore Bundy goes into its fourth week in Miami. He's accused in the brutal slayings of two Florida State University sorority sisters.
What is unusual to see is that many of the onlookers are women, young women.
I'm not afraid of him. He just doesn't look like the type to kill somebody.
Are you a little scared when you look at him?
Yes. It scares me to be in the same room with him.
Why do you do it?
I don't know.
Every time he turns around, I kind of get that feeling, oh no, you're gonna get me next.
But yet you're fascinated by him.
Very.
There were a lot of love letters and proposals of marriages to Ted Bundy.
Strange as it may sound, there were groupies that followed him from courthouse to courthouse, his adoring fans.
So we started interviewing these young women, and you could see by their eyes they were just fascinated by the lurid details, the savagery of the crimes.
Carol Boone believes Bundy is completely innocent. Some have called her his girlfriend. Since that time, she has followed him, helping him prepare his legal cases.
Bundy actually proposed to Carol Ann while she was testifying on his behalf. Bundy and Boone even had a daughter, the result of a moment of cloak and dagger intimacy in prison.
So, in this video, I want to talk about the serial killer vibe, the serial killer aura, the aura of evil, and why it is paradoxically so attractive to women when you have this vibe, and why this vibe is really one of the ultimate keys in my experience to magnetically attracting all girls, to making them very horny very fast. And basically over the past year or so, this has been the biggest breakthrough I had in my own game. As some of you know, I quit drinking last year, and it was actually very difficult to adapt to approaching women in bars and clubs again. So essentially this past year, I had to almost relearn cold approach all over again from the ground up, but this time doing it completely sober, which might sound extreme, but just for context here, you have to bear in mind, you know, the way I'd been meeting women before this is I'd go out to a bar or club on my own, I'd warm up by talking to a few girls, find a girl I had chemistry with, chat to her for an hour or so, and then take her home. I was meeting lots of girls this way, you know, got lots of girlfriends like the ones you see here. But when I stopped drinking, I hit into a massive wall because, you know, let's be real here, going to a nightclub on your own and approaching girls there who are complete strangers and doing that fully sober is actually almost impossible. You know, if you don't understand how difficult this is to do, you've probably never tried it. But doing this now without alcohol, without any kind of external help to get in the zone, it was a grind. But long story short, I figured it out. You know, my game is better than ever now. You know, I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I'm at a point now where girls are literally just coming up and molesting me like I'm a piece of meat at this point. You know, an example of this from a couple of weeks ago, I'm at a bar on my own, so we're just hanging out. Tall redhead girl comes up, approaches me. She's slim, cute face, nice ass. Get to talking, hang out there for a while. Eventually I take her home, we have sex. Easy as that. I mean, she pretty much did all the work and I just sat back and let her game me, so to speak. And this was a pretty hot girl as well. You know, I'm not saying she was an Instagram model, but she was tall, elegant, pretty face, very nice body. You know, she's doing a PhD in biology, very smart girl. And then the following week after that, I'm at another bar. I'd barely even been there 5 minutes when a hot little Ukrainian girl just materializes in front of me. We get to talking and within a minute we're kissing. She then proceeds to follow me around the whole night. You know, she's feeling my chest under my shirt. She's groping my dick over my pants. At one point she was literally unbuttoning my shirt in the middle of the bar. And this was a pretty fancy bar we're at as well. So, you know, people were looking on like, what the fuck is happening? What's wrong with this bitch? I mean, she was literally molesting me right there in the middle of the bar. And why is this happening? Well, the first is obviously semen retention, right? It's the aura you get from long-term semen retention, as I've spoken about in other videos. But the other big thing that's been getting me these results, especially after I quit drinking and had to kind of deal with the challenges that come with that, is this serial killer aura or serial killer vibe that I'm going to talk about today. This isn't just a clickbait thing because I thought that would make a good title or a controversial idea for a video or something. This evil vibe I'm going to talk about is by far the biggest thing I started playing with this past 6 months that's really been giving me these crazy results. This is pretty much a cheat code. I mean, you start doing this, you start playing around with this vibe, and assuming you're also doing semen retention, girls just stick to you like fucking barnacles. It's insane. Okay, so what is the serial killer aura, the psychopath aura? Well, I introduced this in my last video. It was called You Have to Be Pure Evil to Attract Women. If you haven't watched that, then definitely watch it next. But as I said there, you know, it's basically kind of common knowledge, even in the mainstream at this point, that women today are addicted to true crime documentaries and they are fascinated by serial killers, violent crime, murderers. And this isn't some niche thing like a fetish. I mean, this is fully mainstream now. I mean, like Jan from your office is watching documentaries about this shit. True crime is the single single most popular category of podcasts for women, bar none. If you talk to any women at all, you'll know this. And so it's kind of interesting, you know, like saying act like a serial killer sounds like some kind of weird, perverted, fringe PUA advice, right? But this is actually a way for you to connect with fully normie, mainstream type girls on their own terms, funny enough. Like in a sense, you're actually meeting them where they are. Now, I'm not saying women want to be serial killed, obviously, but you have to start asking the question, why are they so fascinated and drawn to this kind of material? And the secret behind this is psychopathy is basically just extreme masculinity. It's like masculinity in its most concentrated and potent form. Now, I realize this is a controversial statement. Most of you probably don't agree with it yet, but the more you look into this, and also the more you actually work on yourself as a man and get better at attracting women, get better at approaching them, flirting with them, the more you're going to find that this is just undeniably true. You know, there's a lot of debate these days about what is masculinity, what is a real man. What I'm going to propose to you in this video is that psychopathy is masculinity. Psychopathy is the most concentrated form of masculinity in the same way that crack is the most concentrated form of cocaine. And there's a school of feminism which would actually agree with this. You know, it says that masculinity is innately evil, that to be a man is in essence to be a psychopath, to be a kind of a predator. And I actually agree with them 100%. The only difference is that I see this as a good thing, not a bad thing. Now, why is this so important to understand in the context of attracting women? It's because the personality traits that make you masculine and that make women horny for you are literally identical to the main psychological markers of psychopathy. And I'm going to prove this. And by extension, if you reject psychopathy, if you reject cultivating these psychopathic traits, you are literally rejecting masculinity itself. And there's some very obvious problems that come with that. One of them, a pretty obvious one, is that you're going to get no bitches. So when I say that psychopathy is just extreme masculinity and psychopathic traits are precisely what make girls wet for you, I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. Right now, you can go on Wikipedia and open up the article on psychopathy, and in the very first paragraph, you will read the following summary. Psychopathy, or psychopathic personality, is a personality construct characterized by impaired empathy and remorse in combination with traits of boldness, disinhibition, and egocentrism. These traits are often masked by superficial charm and immunity to stress. Now, those 6 traits they list there, just in that opening summary, are basically the exact qualities that make you attractive to women. They are the exact same qualities of your personality which you need to cultivate if you want to make girls aroused by you. And when I say aroused, I mean that in the most tangible physiological sense of this word, as in like actually making her underwear get damp. If you want that result, if you want to attract women and make them literally wet for you in their panties, those 6 traits are like a perfect shopping list of the very qualities you need to build into your personality and be able to tick them off. Like, yeah, that's the shit. Start developing those traits and reinforcing them, and pretty girls are going to start trying to fuck you. There's pretty much nothing else to it. The more psychopathic you are, the more you'll attract women. The easier you'll attract women, the more fun you'll have while doing it, and also the less depressed and anxious you'll be just in general going through life. You know, funny enough, all of these, every single one, is highly fucking correlated with high testosterone as well. Isn't that interesting? And this is why, you know, increasingly I'm starting to come to the conclusion that this very construct of psychopath itself is a psyop. It is a form of psychological warfare directed against men, because it is defining the healthiest, most robust traits a man can have as a form of sickness or mental illness, as a quote-unquote disorder. A great example of this kind of stupidity is this video I saw a while ago in which Jordan Peterson was talking about how pickup artists are psychopaths, quote unquote. But this whole frame, this word psychopath, psychopathy, is a completely modern invention. It would not have been recognized as having any meaning whatsoever by an ancient Athenian or a man of the Renaissance. Men who lived at the cultural, scientific, and artistic high points of Western civilization would have considered every single one of these so-called psychopathic traits to be manly virtues. What you define here as psychopathic and treat like it's a sickness, a man of the Renaissance would define as excellence, virtue, or arete. They would say it's men who do not possess these qualities that are sick. Now look, obviously I'm not saying you should act like a psychopath or a serial killer. Don't kill anyone, don't harm anyone ever, obviously. But there's plenty of psychopaths who never hurt a fly. Like, being a psychopath or having these traits doesn't inherently make you harm anyone. It may predispose someone to be more likely to commit crimes or get into trouble, but that's the case with every psychological trait. Every single trait, no matter how good it is, if it's pushed to an extreme or it gets out of control, becomes bad. And I would argue that the opposite of being a psychopath, extreme empathy, extreme oversensitivity to how other people feel, this is actually causing men, and by extension also women, a lot more problems today than anything else. Empathy is f***ing poison. Empathy is a cancer that's gotten out of control. If you can't approach a woman because you're afraid of interrupting her, for example, or you're embarrassed of what people watching will think, you're sick. You understand? Psychopathy is not a disorder. Psychopathy is health. What you have is a disorder. Empathy is a disorder. Oversensitivity to embarrassment is a disorder. Being constantly afraid of making other people uncomfortable and feeling guilty for your own desires as a man is a disorder. That is what's sick. Being a sociopath is healthy. You know, a lot of these red pill guys have been talking for years about the war on men, the so-called war on masculinity. But what about the war on psychopaths? What about the war on actual, healthy, adaptive, masculine traits like boldness, like disinhibition, stress immunity, charm, egocentrism, not getting embarrassed, and so on? There's a much deeper war on actual masculinity taking place, and it has nothing to do with saying men are bad and women are good. It's the redefinition of the healthiest and most robust masculine traits as a quote-unquote mental disorder, as psychopathy. Okay, so if psychopathy is basically good, which I'd like to put forward that it actually is, the obvious objection to this is, well, okay, but then why is psychopathy so often present in sick creeps like serial killers, rapists, murderers, etc., and other people who are obviously bad and who you clearly should not want to emulate? And to explain this, we need to go a little bit deeper now. We need to talk about the psychology of demons. The psychology of the demonic. What is a demon exactly? Where do they come from? And how do they actually possess people? So, first of all, the fact that demons exist objectively is pretty obvious. You just have to keep your eyes open and you'll see them pretty much everywhere. You'll see them in mentally ill people, in homeless people. You'll see them in news stories about people who commit various heinous crimes which are unimaginable to a normal person. You know, I remember back when I was younger, the neighborhood I lived in, you know, fairly middle class, clean, no crime. You know, this woman stabbed her infant daughter in the neck and ripped her throat out in the middle of the parking lot in front of their apartment building. And, you know, no explanation whatsoever. This was not a meth addict. This was, as far as I could tell, fairly normal, you know, middle or maybe working class white woman, single mother, but not a crazy person, not a drug addict. So how does something like that happen? Or more to the point here, how does a guy like Ted Bundy happen? You know, a lot of people glamorize Ted Bundy, including a lot of women, but if you actually read some of the details, the things he did, it is not glamorous at all. It's really, really bad. I mean, cutting women's breasts off, like really, really horrible stuff. I think he even mutilated a 12-year-old, if I remember correctly. It is literally demonic. I mean, it is inhuman. When you read about these things, it is impossible to understand how a person can do it. So if psychopathy is good and healthy and it's ultimately what makes you attractive to women, then how could it be associated with all this stuff that is very obviously not good? The way it works is this. Everybody is born with certain personality traits. For example, everyone has instincts like anger, kindness, sexuality, love, jealousy. But what happens is society tells you that some of these instincts, like kindness, for example, are good, but others, like say anger or expressing sexuality, are bad. And so society punishes you when you exhibit a trait like anger or sexuality or being too loud or some of these other positive psychopathic traits we talked about. And as a consequence of this, the so-called bad trait gets repressed and pushed down into the subconscious mind. So in the beginning, when a kid is born, they're pure and innocent. They don't distinguish between good and evil. They have all of these traits, both the ones we consider good as well as the ones we consider quote unquote bad. But society then imposes this artificial duality onto us. It says some of these parts of you are good, but some of them are bad. And it forces you to repress the parts of your personality that it deems to be bad. And this obviously differs for different people depending on your parents, your upbringing, the culture you're part of. But what happens is that these so-called bad traits are never developed. And with punishment and conditioning, aka education, they get pushed down into the unconscious, they get repressed and buried there. And then to outward appearances, it looks as if the person has become a healthy, well-adapted, normal human being. You know, society looks at this person and says, very good, you're a very good boy. You never get angry, you never get sexual, you never make anyone feel uncomfortable, you're always considerate towards others. But in fact, have the impulses for anger or sexuality or cruelty actually gone away? No. All that's happened is that they've been pushed down into the darkness of the deep unconscious mind. And what will happen in many cases is that now that they've been pushed down into the dark, these rejected personal qualities can essentially start to group together and form into a complex, otherwise known as a demon. And this is what happened to men like Ted Bundy. This is what happened to pretty much all serial killers, rapists, murderers, criminals, and to many of the people in jails and mental hospitals. They had some of these very strong, and I would even argue potentially positive, manly traits, which are wrongly called psychopathic traits, but society shamed them for having these traits. It punished them for having these traits. Maybe their parents even beat them for showing these traits. They were told they were sick, bad, wrong, perverted, etc. And they were never encouraged to make these traits conscious and develop them more fully. And so what happens is these psychopathic personality traits, which start off being good and useful, because they get buried down, they band together and they form into, in some people, an entirely separate and autonomous second personality known as a demon. And this is where all demonic possession comes from. This is what demonic possession actually is. It's a psychological phenomenon. And then sometimes when the person drinks or does drugs, the demon personality comes to the surface. It takes over the person's body and overpowers their conscious personality, and it makes them commit various heinous crimes. All right, fine. But as the philosopher Jeffrey Epstein once asked, what has this got to do with pussy? So what I'm telling you is, to get girls, to make women horny, you need to summon this demon. You need to make the demonic conscious. You need to bring the demon to life, and you need to integrate it so that it becomes a part of your conscious personality. When you do this, the demon becomes your servant rather than your master. It becomes useful to you rather than harmful. In actual fact, a demon, once fully integrated with the conscious personality, becomes an angel. It is your guardian angel, so to speak. And make no mistake, the demonic is what attracts women. The demonic is what gives you all your creative powers. It's also what gives you things like courage, bravery, boldness, the ability to deal with people in life. The demonic is where joy comes from. It's where sense of humor and a mischievous playfulness comes from. You know, one of the most characteristic qualities of a person who has not integrated their own inner demonic qualities is that they are always extremely dull. Now, when I say that you need to summon a demon, or you even need to become a demon, that might sound like it's a very dangerous thing to do, like we're playing with fire or something. It's actually precisely the opposite. All the danger comes from not integrating the demonic. All the danger in life comes from leaving these psychopathic or demonic traits buried in the darkness of the unconscious, where over time they gradually become blacker and denser and more weird and perverted and complicated as they group together with other rejected qualities. And they grow like a mold or a fungus in exactly the same way that certain molds can only grow in the absence of light. This is actually one of the reasons why guys who are into nofap, you know, guys who make it their mission to never watch porn, are nevertheless constantly relapsing, and they can seemingly never go for more than a few weeks or even a few days without giving into their temptation to fap and, you know, break semen retention. And a lot of these guys, it's very interesting. They talk about how, you know, porn is demonic, temptations are demonic, everything is demonic, OnlyFans girls are demonic. Listen, I am demonic. I am actually a demon. I have integrated my own demonic. And guess what? I never feel tempted to watch porn anymore. I never feel tempted to masturbate. Ever. It's just not something that comes up for me anymore. The more evil I've become consciously, the less I am tempted to do these unclean things. You know, I mentioned at the start of the video, I quit drinking last year. Up to that point, I had been drinking heavily every weekend ever since I was about 14. Guess how hard it was for me to quit drinking? Not hard at all. I literally just stopped overnight. I even go to bars every weekend still. I'm around alcohol constantly, but I feel no temptation to drink whatsoever. None of this takes any willpower. You know, I do not exert willpower to not watch porn or to not drink. I simply decided I was going to stop doing these things, and so I stopped. And I am telling you, this comes from integrating the demonic. It comes from integrating your evil rather than rejecting it. So you can say this is dangerous. I would argue it's the exact opposite. Not integrating the demonic is what's dangerous. You know, it's very fucking paradoxical. The more I've embraced evil, the more I've dabbled in deliberately summoning demons, so to speak, the more pure and virtuous my actual day-to-day life looks. You know, I live very, very clean. I don't do drugs ever. I don't masturbate or look at porn ever. And I don't even drink anymore. And I don't even feel a temptation to do these things. You understand? It takes me no discipline whatsoever not to watch porn or not to drink. That's the paradox of this. Whereas a guy who's very religious and he's afraid of demons, for example, and he may even get angry or scared when I use that term in a positive sense. It's guys like that who constantly have temptations. It's guys like that who almost always can't stop fapping to porn, no matter how hard they try. You know, Jesus talked about this in the Gospel of Thomas. He said, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. Man, is that the truth. And that also explains a guy like Ted Bundy. It explains pretty much every criminal in prison, every crazy person in a mental asylum. None of these instincts are bad. None of them. Every single human instinct, every single personality trait a human can have is good if it's integrated and used effectively. But if it's repressed, if it's not developed, if it's forced down into the darkness, it groups together with other rejected traits and it becomes a demon. And these demons do have distinct autonomous personalities. You know, when you're dealing with a demon, you are actually dealing with a completely separate entity from the person themselves. So with all of that out of the way, I now want to get into the practical side of how you actually do this. How do you cultivate this serial killer vibe, this demonic vibe that makes women incredibly horny for you? And you can basically break this down into 4 things, what I call the 4 horsemen of the attractive psychopathic personality. And these are psychopathic stress immunity, sometimes called groundedness, psychopathic boldness or purposefulness, turning your empathy dial all the way down to 0, and psychopathic self-amusement, also known sometimes as superficial charm. So these are all traits that, insofar as they're markers of psychopathy, are generally believed to be bad things. I believe they are all good things. And the evidence for this you will see with your own fucking eyes when you develop these 4 qualities and you notice that hot women are suddenly treating you like your Prince fucking Charming. You know, you're going to notice that when you develop these traits, your game blows up with women like crazy almost immediately, even to the point of like girls actually approaching you, chasing you, touching you, being very sexual towards you. Now, this isn't a magic pill. You know, you still have to actually go out and approach. You still have to do things like semen retention, keep your testosterone levels high, lift weights, eat healthy, do all the core fundamentals of being an attractive guy, having that attractive vibe, which I've talked about in my other videos. But what I'm saying is, when you add these 4 serial killer personality traits on top of that, this is like the fucking cheat code to getting girls, bar none. I mean, this has blown up my game like nothing else this past year. When you master this vibe, you're going to notice that women are way, way friendlier to you right off the bat. They're warmer to you. They're more feminine around you. They're more kind of like giggly and almost girlish in your presence. They almost act more kind of like childlike and playful around you when you've cultivated this vibe of evil, which of course is very, very counterintuitive. You know, this actually surprised even me when I started experimenting with this past few months, because you'd think it'd be the opposite, right? You know, acting evil should creep girls out. It should make them scared of you. Whereas acting nice should make girls nice to you and it should make them friendly. And that is not the case at all. It's actually the exact fucking opposite. Acting nice makes girls creeped out and makes them scared of you. Whereas when you act evil, in this way I'm going to show you, they're usually really nice to you. It's kind of freaky. It makes them warm, friendly, kind of girlish and playful around you. It's very, very interesting how this kind of polarizes in that way. So let's crack into this. The first quality of the serial killer vibe, and by far the most important one, is what's called immunity to stress. You could also simply call this groundedness, masculinity, being non-reactive, having a higher tolerance to stress, a higher tolerance to trauma than most other normal people do. And in the literature on psychopathy, this is one of the main markers of a psychopath. And of all the 4 traits I'm going to talk about, this is by far the one that's going to get you the most. This is also the very first thing that every girl will always test you on when you first approach her. And this test is very simple. You know, whenever you cold approach a girl, she will look deep into your eyes because you can tell everything about a man from his eyes. And what girls are looking for when they look in your eyes is precisely this quality. Are you grounded? Are you non-reactive, stone cold, icy? In other words, are you able to look back into her eyes with calm, unwavering, steady eye contact? Now, this sounds like a simple thing, but no one actually does it, except sociopaths and guys who have literally been training this by approaching dozens of women per week for months or years. You know, they used to say in the pickup artist community that you can always tell how long a guy's been in the game by looking in his eyes. When a guy's new at this, he generally isn't able to hold eye contact for that long. His eyes are kind of darting all over the place. He's kind of giddy, nervous, very ungrounded. But the longer you do this, the more often you approach women, the more you develop this sort of center of gravity where nothing can knock you off balance. And again, the girl can see this right away in your eyes. And other guys can see it in your eyes. This is one of those things that a lot of special forces and military guys have as well. Also, guys have been involved in crime and seen a lot of violence. When a guy's been going through the bullshit, approaching thousands of women in this case, he has that 1,000-yard stare. He can look you in your eyes and almost look through you. It's almost kind of intimidating. It's almost like he has a kind of power in his eyes. Like it's as if his eyes have arms that come out of them and grab you and kind of hold you there. And this is something that just cannot be faked. You know, you can read all the little articles about eye contact you want. You can watch YouTube tutorials about it. It's not going to give you this. The only way you get this is by going out and going through the bullshit, by going through the trauma. You know, approaching thousands of girls is traumatic. Being rejected by dozens of those girls or more, you know, sometimes brutally, is traumatic. Being insulted, being mocked by people, being humiliated, being tooled by other guys at the bar, being in weird, fucked up, awkward, or embarrassing situations over and over again, and all this other shit that happens to you when you're learning game, it is traumatic. It actually does traumatize you. And what I'm saying is that's actually a good thing, because over time it makes you numb to all of it. You just don't give a fuck anymore. And that's actually what you want. That's what gives you this quality of freakish groundedness, this psychopathic stress tolerance where when the girl looks in your eyes, she can see it's almost like you're inhuman. You don't have the normal reactions that other guys have. Like a glass could smash and someone could scream just a few feet away from you, but you wouldn't even blink. You don't even turn your head to look at it. Nothing makes you react. Nothing gets under your skin. It is demonic. And it is very fucking attractive to women. Now, the way you get this is very interesting. It's all about adrenaline. It's about building what's called adrenaline control, a tolerance to adrenaline. Adrenaline is a chemical that's sometimes called the stress hormone. It's what triggers the fight or flight response in your body. And we all know what it feels like, right? You know, if you've ever approached a girl, there's this huge adrenaline spike right afterwards. You know, you walk away after doing the approach and your heart is beating fast. You're kind of unsteady on your feet. Your legs might be shaking even. That's adrenaline. That's what adrenaline feels like. And that is basically the opposite of this groundedness you need to develop. You know, you need to become numb to that adrenaline spike so that it barely affects you anymore, so that you basically almost don't feel anything anymore, really, to be honest. That's actually what masculinity is. It's basically a kind of numbness to forms of stress that would normally destroy other people. And that's also the core element of this serial killer vibe and the reason why it's so attractive to women. Now, the way you build this kind of numbness to adrenaline, this adrenaline tolerance, is very paradoxical, because we've said that stress is the enemy, adrenaline is the enemy, but the way you build this tolerance to adrenaline is precisely by increasing adrenaline, by going into many, many different situations that give you that massive adrenaline spike until you become fully fucking numb to it. And this works just like alcohol or drugs, you know, in the sense that if you drink every day, over time, you need more and more alcohol to get the same level of drunk. You know, maybe when you start off, you can have 2 beers and feel good, but then over time you need 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because your body has developed a tolerance to that chemical, alcohol, or ethanol, technically. Now, that's a bad thing with drink and drugs, obviously, but this also works positively in terms of building your tolerance to stress. Because at the end of the day, stress is literally just a chemical in your body. It's a drug, so to speak, called adrenaline. And in exactly the same way as you cannot avoid building a tolerance to a drug the more often you take it, the more you approach girls and get that adrenaline spike from doing that, the more you're naturally going to develop a tolerance to that adrenaline until it gets to the point where you don't feel it at all anymore. And this is fucking cool. It's also, you know, from other people's perspective, it can even look kind of scary, because you do actually become like that psychopath who doesn't have normal reactions to things, who doesn't feel stress at all. And this gives you a great deal of power in social situations. It is actually the ultimate inner freedom. You know, in a very paradoxical way, a psychopath has achieved a sort of enlightenment or liberation because if you think about it, right, what are they seeking in Buddhism and these other Eastern teachings? It's the exact same inner freedom. It's that freedom from negative emotions, freedom from stress, freedom from caring what people think of you. So this is almost like a kind of left-hand path way of achieving that exact same goal. They do it by sitting in a monastery and praying all day and doing compassion meditations. I do it by going out and seeking adventure alone at night by approaching and womanizing and raising hell. So go out, approach girls, push yourself out of your comfort zone. You know, when you do that approach and when you walk away afterwards and you're literally shaking, you know, your heart's racing, your legs are trembling, and you have that feeling in your chest like, whoa, holy shit, that was intense. That's what you want. That intensity, that adrenaline spike is what actually changes you. And so embrace that feeling. Whenever you feel like that, that's how you know you're actually growing. Seek it out deliberately. Find ways to trigger that stress response as much as you can, as often as you can. The more stress you make yourself feel in the short term, the higher your tolerance to stress will become over the long term. And that's what gives you the power to make girls dripping fucking wet within seconds of meeting them. It's all down to this. Do you have that groundedness? Do you have that calm, steady gaze? That kind of low center of gravity and unreactiveness? And this is also something you develop in the short term, just on like a night by night basis. You know, your first approach to the night or day, if you're doing day game, it will usually be very ungrounded. You know, you're kind of nervous, you're shaky, you're not able to hold eye contact with the girl, or you forget to hold eye contact. But with each approach you do in a night, you'll notice that you're becoming more and more grounded with each one. And this is a feeling in your body. Again, it's like that kind of low center of gravity. You walk slower, you take your time more. People tend to move out of your way. It's very interesting. You know, when you first get to the club, people kind of get the sense that you're not grounded, and guys might kind of shove past you or try to push you aside. If you're really new to this, guys might even kind of like mock you or make fun of you a bit. But as you do more and more approaches and you become more grounded with each one, you start having this kind of aura where people start moving out of your way. You know, people are much more polite to you. If a guy steps on your foot, he's like, oh, sorry, man. And you know, for all intents and purposes, it actually does feel in some ways like you're becoming possessed by a kind of demon. There's just a sort of a heaviness you have. You may notice your voice gets lower. You have a kind of like an evil laugh. You're kind of more playful, but in a kind of evil way. And women definitely start reacting to you, responding to you more. They start looking at you more, smiling at you, flirting with you, approaching you. It's very, very cool. Okay, the next trait of the serial killer vibe that makes girls wetter than a fucking water park is psychopathic boldness. Being dominant, being extremely domineering and purposeful. In the literature on psychopaths, they call this fearlessness or fearless dominance. It's been described as an eagerness for risk-seeking behaviors, as well as a lack of the fear that normally goes with them. This obviously shades into that immunity to stress that we just talked about. In many ways, they're kind of like two sides of the same coin. Immunity to stress makes you bolder. It gives you the ability to act bolder. But then on the flip side, the more often you act boldly, the more it builds your immunity to stress. So these two things are very much synergistic. Now, this quality of boldness that psychopaths have is also related to another core trait called disinhibition or being uninhibited. And what's interesting about all these traits, you know, stress, immunity, boldness, disinhibition, is that drinking alcohol gives you all these things almost automatically. You know, drinking alcohol is almost like pushing a magic button that just gives you these traits without you having to work on them or build them into your personality deliberately. One of the biggest reasons I've been resonating so much with this whole topic of the psychopathic aura is because since I quit drinking last year, I had to figure out a way to develop these traits in myself without relying on alcohol to get there. So psychopathic boldness, extreme purposefulness. This involves things like risk-seeking, thrill-seeking, being fearless, seeking adventure. And when this trait gets out of control, this is obviously the one that gets actual psychopaths into the most trouble. It's why they usually end up in prison, which obviously isn't good. But what I would say is that this boldness, this fearlessness, this risk-seeking behavior, it is incredibly attractive to women. You know, along with that emotional groundedness and stress immunity, this is probably the biggest needle mover, the biggest sort of tool in your toolbox that lets you get girls super fucking horny for you in seconds whenever you demonstrate it. And the reason for this is that being bold, domineering, purposeful, fearless, risk-seeking, reckless, these are basically like the most concentrated form of raw masculinity there is. You know, masculinity equals risk-taking. Tattoo this onto your brain. To be masculine is to seek risk. This is what it's all about. This is what makes you masculine. It's risk-taking. You are never going to feel really alive as a man unless you're taking some kind of risk. And you can only get this quality of boldness by doing it. You can't get this from a book. You only develop boldness by actually going out, throwing yourself into new situations, approaching girls, putting yourself out of your comfort zone. That is what makes you feel alive. That is also what gives you all the personal growth. You know, you're growing your discipline, your focus, your will. This is what makes you a fucking man, nothing else. And the more you do this, the more bold moves you make in life, the more you develop that immunity to stress, and you start becoming a very powerful kind of being who no longer has the normal fears and limitations of an ordinary man. This is, in my opinion, the entire point and larger purpose of doing pickup beyond just getting laid or having more girls in your life. I view that as almost just a side benefit at this point. The reason I still do this after so many years is that it changes you. This is about becoming something that is more than human. It's about leaving humanity behind. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. You know, I've been watching a lot of interviews with former special forces guys, Delta Force operators, guys like that. And I now believe that cold approach pickup and war might be the two best and possibly even the only ways to create this kind of inner transformation I'm talking about. I could be wrong about that. There might be a few other avenues. A few that come to mind are martial arts, fighting, putting yourself in a ring with a large man who is literally trying to kill you, basically. I think that might be scary enough on a visceral level to affect this kind of change internally as well. And possibly even something like stand-up comedy, in the sense that you're exposing yourself to humiliation and embarrassment and you have to either kind of sink or swim. But I mean, the thing about that is, who wants to be a fucking comedian, right? I mean, does that sound cool to you? It doesn't sound cool to me. And neither does getting brain damage from being hit in the head in the boxing ring. Well, what is cool? I think war is cool, assuming you survive and don't get your face burnt off or something. I think being a mercenary or in the special forces or even in law enforcement is cool in the sense that it can be a path for this kind of self-initiation. It's also the only legal way to kill people, which for a certain kind of man might be appealing. However, I also think, and I will die on this hill, that being a womanizer, being a Casanova, Don Juan, having that as a skill is very fucking cool. You know, and everyone will tell you this is cringe. They'll say, oh, you want to be a pickup artist? That's immature. What are you, 15? But really, you can go fuck yourself, because it's just all lies. It's all cope. You know, because when you really get down to it and you strip away all the bullshit and the rationalizations, what man on this planet who is a man does not want to be able to walk into any room on this earth, hand pick the girl he finds most attractive, and then take her home and have sex with her? If you can stand in front of me as a man and look me in the eyes and tell me you don't want that, I'm going to tell you that you're a fucking liar, or you're a fat. So, you know, when you compare this to being a super soldier or a one-man army or something, it might sound kind of petty, yet it's not actually such a small thing in practice. This is something that every man on earth wants if he is at all honest with himself, rather than being a sniveling, lying, hypocritical little cretin. It's a power that virtually no man on earth actually has when you take away alcohol. And it's something that, to actually develop this power, rather than just daydreaming about it, but to actually be able to walk out of your house right now and do this, pick up a girl, you know, a hot one. This is something that is earned over a period of years in most cases, and it is not fucking easy. And it's especially fucking hard to do it while you're sober, I can promise you that. And look, you know, if you want to cheat on this and drink while you're doing your approaches, that's fine. You know, I did that for many, many years. I had great results. And if you're only in this for the practical goal of just getting laid more or getting a girlfriend, that's perfectly fine. Not everyone needs to be a fanatic about this the way I am. However, these guys who want to talk tough about their MMA or being shot at in a war, or the fact they made a lot of money in crypto, so they have a sports car or something, I really would like to see them walk into a nightclub alone with no friends, no wingman, not take a single drink, and then pull a girl. I'd love to see it. I really would. I don't think a single one of these motherfuckers could do this, no matter how tough they are legitimately in other domains. You know, being a pickup artist, really being a pickup artist, by which I mean a successful one, and who does it sober, and not just like the joke cartoon character version of this you see. It is fucking aristocratic. It is the elite of the elite in terms of self-empowerment and self-discipline. It reminds me of how con artists, you know, the old school confidence men, they were known back in the day as the aristocrats of crime. The aristocrats of crime. I love that. And that is what being a pickup artist is. It's something in the same vein. It's like that operator, that mysterious stranger who appears in town. He's got a shadowy background and he somehow manages to charm everyone there into giving him all the money, and then he's gone. Now, that's not a moral thing, and I'm not glamorizing it. You know, in reality, those con artists always live pretty shitty lives. You wouldn't trade places with them if you could see how they actually live. But that is power. And it's a very interesting kind of power. It's much more interesting, in my opinion, than the ability to put someone in a chokehold or shoot people in a war. There's something much more cerebral about it. So, boldness, psychopathic boldness, high appetite for risk-seeking behavior, adventure-seeking. This stuff, when you cultivate these traits and then when you demonstrate them, it gets girls wet like nothing else. So when you see the girl, draw a line on the ground from you to her in your mind, then walk over to her in a straight line and approach her. That's all you got to do. That demonstrates a massive amount of value right away. It's highly fucking magnetic. The opposite of this, risk aversion, not being willing to take risks, this is what gives girls the ick. And again, the way you demonstrate this one is very fucking easy. You approach her. That's the risk. That's all the boldness you need to have, really. You just do that and you got this box ticked. You don't need to worry about it again, ever. Okay, third item on the list here is maybe the most controversial one, and this is turn your empathy down to zero. This means no guilt, no remorse, cultivating a complete lack of regard for other people's feelings. This is, believe it or not, a good thing if it's used in a controlled way in the appropriate circumstances. Now, obviously, a certain amount of empathy is good and healthy, and it's essential to success in all areas of life. But that being said, when it comes to girls, and especially when it comes to approaching them, you need to learn to turn down your empathy like a volume knob. Or sometimes you just need to turn it off completely. And that is because empathy is actually the same impulse as what causes you to feel embarrassed. The higher your empathy is, the more sensitive you'll be to embarrassment. And you need to destroy embarrassment. If you want to succeed with women, you need to become someone who basically doesn't get embarrassed anymore by anything. And understand, that is a psychopathic trait. Make no mistake about this. Not being embarrassed is a freakish thing. It's not normal. It comes from having no empathy for others. Now, like I said, this one is very nuanced because there's a lot of situations with girls and in life where empathy is extremely important and it's totally essential to success. There's many cases in life where not having empathy, not understanding the other person's position will fuck you over big time in unbelievably painful ways. So you do need to have empathy. You actually need to have more empathy than most people do. You need to be able to step into another person's shoes and see the world or the situation from their point of view. That is very, very important. It's one of the most vital traits of successful people, bar none. Psychopaths who are born without this, it is actually a massive disability for them in many respects. Like, having impaired empathy is comparable to almost being a retard. It's why so many of them end up in prison. So when I say cultivate low empathy or learn to turn your empathy off, I don't mean to have low empathy all the time. What I mean is you need to develop power over your empathy. You need to be able to switch it on or off at will. And this is actually a very, very weird thing to be able to do. When you develop it, it is a kind of superpower. Because on one hand, you have all the benefits of being a sociopath in terms of not getting embarrassed at all, but you don't have any of the downside in terms of not understanding other people's position. You know, we generally tend to view empathy as a very positive thing in our culture these days. We typically look at it as if it has no downsides, and that is a huge fucking mistake. Empathy, when pushed to its extreme, is a vice. Excessive empathy, unmitigated empathy, empathy running wild without any counterbalance is a poison. It is a corrosive acid. It destroys societies. It destroys nations. Empathy has destroyed Western civilization over the past century or so. We may never recover or win back what's been lost now. And in this respect, I would say that empathy is more dangerous than evil. Empathy is more dangerous than so-called psychopathy. The enthronement of empathy over all other values has been an unmitigated disaster for the human race and for Western civilization in particular. And just as out of control empathy can destroy nations, it also destroys men. Shame, embarrassment, feeling like you have to apologize for your desires as a man, feeling guilty for your own existence, for even taking up space physically in an environment. These things come from empathy. They come from an extreme sensitivity to other people's feelings. And what I'm saying is that you need to annihilate this. Stop giving a fuck what other people are feeling or thinking about you. It's none of your business. How they feel about you or how they feel in your presence is their problem to deal with, not yours. As long as you're not breaking any laws, you can do whatever the fuck you want. If people have a problem with something you're doing, they can say, hey man, can you stop doing that? And then you can say, yeah, sure, as a courtesy. But until they say something or register an actual complaint, who gives a fuck what they're thinking about in their own head? Stop giving a fuck what other people think of you. Have no empathy. Have no remorse. Now, in the literature on psychopaths, they refer to this as cold-heartedness. Personally, I'm not actually in love with that term because for our purposes here, there is actually a certain degree of warmth you need to cultivate with this, strangely enough. But basically, this trait of having no empathy, no regard for other people's feelings, it can be very, very fucking useful in the context of cold approach and attracting women. And the reason why is that, like I said, really the biggest problem and the biggest bottleneck you're going to run into when you're going out and approaching girls or trying to approach girls is this fear of embarrassment. If you actually go out to a bar and try to approach some girls there, assuming you're not able to do it, you'll quickly realize the biggest reason why, the main thing holding you back, is simply that you're afraid of being embarrassed. You may also find the emotion coming up of, well, I don't want to interrupt her. She's in the middle of a conversation with her friends. I don't want to walk up to them and interrupt them. That's rude. And that's a completely normal, healthy impulse. And what I'm telling you is that you need to destroy that healthy impulse and you need to become a freak, a monster. You need to destroy this impulse you have for empathy. All it's doing is stopping you from being effective. You need to become shameless. You need to become egocentric. You need to become narcissistic in the sense that you really do believe that talking to you and getting to experience you is going to be a lot better for them than whatever boring shit they were talking about before you arrived. And they can go back to their boring little conversation about Jenny from work later. Interrupting someone's conversation is not that big of a fucking deal, okay? Nothing was lost. You didn't take anything from them they can't get back. If having this serious conversation is so fucking important to them, then maybe they shouldn't have come to the club on a Saturday night to have it, right? But of course, most times when you interrupt girls' conversations to approach them, they actually don't give a fuck. They're just like, oh, hey, nice to meet you. And over time with experience, you'll see this. You'll just see that 9 times out of 10, when you interrupt someone's conversation to approach them, they're actually happy to meet you. They were bored. The conversation was boring the fuck out of them, whereas you're this new shiny object. And on the rare occasion that you are interrupting something important, they'll just tell you that. They'll say, hey, sorry, we're actually in the middle of something here. And then you can say, fine, no worries. See you in the funny pages. Whatever, bounce out. No big deal. You can even approach them again later. So stop being embarrassed. Stop caring about other people's feelings. Stop being so fucking considerate of other people's feelings all the time at the expense of your own. In actual fact, what is called empathy or kindness or being considerate to others is almost always simply weakness. It's simply cowardice masking as virtue. Empathy is not a virtue. It's a vice. Destroy it. Empathy is what makes you embarrassed, and fear of embarrassment is, I guarantee you, the single biggest reason you're not getting your dick sucked right now. Embarrassment is also why you're not rich, by the way. Success with girls and with money is mostly just about having nerve, having no shame. You don't need to be particularly smart to be successful. You just need to be shameless. You need to become someone who doesn't feel embarrassment in the same way that normal people do. And funny enough, whenever you do anything that shows a girl you have no empathy, she immediately becomes more attracted to you. To give an example of this, one of the best ways to show a girl you don't care about her feelings is to disagree with her and to do it in a very blunt, unapologetic way. This is probably the easiest way to generate attraction in a girl from complete scratch. It's very, very counterintuitive. But for example, recently I was talking to this girl at a bar. She obviously liked me. She'd approached me first. This girl was tall, pretty, kind of slightly nerdy. And it turned out she was actually very smart. She told me she was doing a PhD in biology. So I asked her what the focus of her thesis is, and she tells me it's all about, whey protein, how, taking whey protein is really good for you and stuff like that. And my reaction to this is, yeah, I think that's pretty much all bullshit. Whey protein is a complete waste of money. It also tastes like shit. You should just get your protein from Whole Foods like meat and eggs, or just drink a glass of milk. It's better for you than drinking that talcum powder garbage that's been sitting in a factory in Shenzhen for the past 18 months. And the girl, on hearing me say this, her face just dropped. Bless her heart, she spent the last 6 years of her life devoted to this. And she's kind of just standing there like, okay, well, yeah, I guess that's fair. She really didn't have it in her to try to argue with me. And I didn't want to completely traumatize this girl, so I did give her an out. I said, but that's just my amateur opinion as a retard. You obviously study this stuff. You probably know more about it than I do. It's important with this stuff. You don't want to bully people. You want to give them an easy out just to be gracious. It's more classy. But the point is, after I said all that stuff, the girl became noticeably more attracted to me. And long story short, I actually did end up taking her home that night and we had sex. And a big part of that, one of those little things you can do that really boost up her attraction is showing her you have no empathy. By, for example, being willing to disagree with her bluntly in a very unapologetic way, or by making, slightly edgy or offensive jokes and not apologizing for them. If you can do that and be unapologetic, these things make a girl very aroused by you because she sees that you don't give a fuck what her or anyone else thinks of you. She sees you're not overly conformist. You don't bend with whatever way the wind is blowing. You have strong views and you're inflexible in those views. If she agrees, great. If she doesn't, too bad. You're not changing what you think or believe for her. What you see is what you fucking get. And of course, that actually tends to make a girl trust you more because she sees that you have actual integrity. Now, the fourth and final quality of the serial killer aura is what I call psychopathic self-amusement. Or you could simply call this playfulness, sense of humor, a kind of warmth. Now, this might sound strange on the surface because we don't normally associate things like playfulness and warmth with sociopaths or serial killers, but in a weird way, this is actually the key to unlocking this whole vibe. And it's not quite as out of left field as you might expect. If you look at videos of a guy like Ted Bundy in the courtroom during his trial, strangely enough, he does actually come across as quite warm and almost kind of playful in his mannerisms a lot of the time. And people say this was because he was trying to manipulate the jury, and so he was basically like kind of turning on the charm, which I think is true. But I think that in addition to this, because he was highly narcissistic and self-absorbed, he genuinely enjoyed all the attention he was getting from the trial and from being on the news and the papers writing about him. You know, from the perspective of a narcissist, even though he's about to go to jail and eventually be executed, that situation of being the center of attention, being an international news story, having everyone looking at him, talking about him, hanging on his every word, that was probably very enjoyable for a guy like Ted Bundy. And so I think that when you're seeing him smiling and being warm and playful in court, it's not just an act. I think he probably was genuinely enjoying himself. And that is basically the exact same vibe you need to cultivate when you're out meeting women. It's a kind of narcissistic self-amusement where you take great pleasure in sharing your personality with them, having them pay all this attention to you, being the center of attention, which if you approach a girl or especially a group of girls, you definitely will be. You know, they'll all be looking intently at you. And if you're like I was, you know, quite shy, you might think that's a bad thing. Like you just want to hide and have no one look at you and not pay attention to you. But no, that. Become like Ted Bundy. Become narcissistic. Embrace being the center of attention. Learn to enjoy it. Learn to take self-amusement from it. You know, even if it's negative attention, it's like, yes, everyone's paying attention to me now. Very good. I'm an emotional vampire. So I've talked about these key ingredients of the serial killer vibe, you know, immunity to stress, boldness, low empathy. And those are sort of like the three legs of the stool that hold this up. But the actual seat of the stool, the face of it, the sort of polish you want to put on this is this sort of superficial charm. It's a warmth and a kind of playfulness that comes from being self-amused. Now, I've talked about self-amusement and how to be self-amused a lot in my previous video on chaos magic. Definitely go and watch that if you haven't already or if you're not familiar with this principle. But what does self-amusement look like in practice? Well, I mean, it does actually look a lot like Ted Bundy in those videos of him in court. And if you approach women in a bar, for example, in a bold and fearless way, like what I've been saying, but then you put on this kind of superficially charming, warm, self-amused demeanor, it's generally going to work very, very well for you. So it's well known that psychopaths are often charming. You know, you see this with Ted Bundy. He's extremely fucking charming. In the literature on psychopathy, they refer to this as superficial charm or insincere charm. And this is the shit. I mean, this is really what you need to cultivate. A kind of glib, superficial charm. It's like you're smiling and you're being ingratiating and even flattering at times, but it's almost done in this kind of insincere way that can even come across as a little bit patronizing. I'll show you a clip that demonstrates this well in a second. But basically, the superficial charm of sociopaths, it's been defined as the social act of saying or doing things because they are well received by others rather than what one actually believes or wants to do. It is sometimes referred to as telling people what they want to hear. Generally, superficial charm is an effective way to ingratiate or persuade. It is strongly correlated with antisocial personality disorder. And this is basically the kind of vibe you want to cultivate with this. This is a key skill you need to cultivate. Being superficially charming, having this slightly insincere charm, as they call it, this is a huge key to attracting women. It's a huge key to approaching women and having them like you right away. It's also a big key to actually having fun with it. You know, this is a form of self-amusement. So the serial killer vibe that really pulls this all together, it's a kind of playfully evil vibe, a playfully cruel vibe. And this comes across in everything. You know, it's the way you walk in the room, the way you look at her, the way you walk up to her. It's not necessarily about anything you say. It's even just in your movements, your presence as a man, the way you move, your facial expressions. And the best way I've ever seen this vibe depicted is in this scene from the movie The Rules of Attraction. It's a great movie. Definitely check it out. It was written by the same guy who wrote American Psycho. And this character, Sean Bateman, is meant to be Patrick Bateman's brother. And it's funny, you know, when you see me say here to have this serial killer vibe, you might think I'm saying like to act like Patrick Bateman from American Psycho, but that's actually wrong. You know, as great as that movie is, the vibe that Patrick Bateman has is really not the vibe you want when you're approaching women. It's kind of too cold. It's too detached. It's kind of clinical and disinterested. It's very funny, of course, but in approaching women, that type of vibe doesn't actually work all that well. The real key to this serial killer vibe you want to model, you can see it here in this scene of Sean Bateman approaching a girl at a party.
Pretend to be a vampire. I don't really need to pretend because it's who I am. An emotional vampire. I just kind of expect it. Vampires are real. That I was born this way. That I feed off of other people's real emotions. Search for this night's prey. Who will it be?
You look familiar. Have we met?
I think I fucked you somewhere towards the beginning of term. The Wet Wednesday party. No.
What's your name?
Peter.
Really? Aren't you a senior?
No, freshman.
Really? I thought you were older.
No, freshman. Peter. Peter the freshman.
And you don't even really need to hear the rest of what he's saying here. You know, you can just see the vibe I mean just from looking at him. It's all right there. This is the fucking vibe I'm talking about. This is that aura of kind of self-amused evil that pulls girls in like crazy. This right here is exactly the vibe you want to be playing with on your approaches. Now, just watching this clip and trying to copy this vibe is probably not going to work on its own, you know, unless you're already very experienced with approaching women. When you get to a bar or club or you see that girl on the day you want to approach, you're probably not going to be able to just switch on a vibe like this at will. Like anything else, this is something you have to warm up to, and it comes from doing some warm-up approaches, you know, getting yourself in the zone socially. And it also comes from developing that muscle of self-amusement. That's where you say things that make you laugh, because if you laugh, if you're amused, the girl will also laugh and she'll also be amused based on that old law of state transference. Whatever you feel, she feels. So the key with this serial killer vibe is that it's an evil vibe, but it's also a highly self-amused vibe. That's what makes it work. You know, you don't want to be going up to girls with like a mean look on your face, scowling or something. That doesn't work. The vibe needs to be evil plus playfulness or self-amusement. That's the fucking holy grail that lets you get girls crazy turned on, crazy wet for you. At the end of the day, there's really nothing that turns girls on more than when you appear to be fully evil. Again, so long as it's evil with a smile, evil wrapped in a pretty package of kind of smiling mischief and self-amusement. And when your actions are evil in the sense that you're breaking rules, you're approaching girls, you're kind of going against social pressure, and you don't give a fuck what anyone thinks of you. When you do that, and when you do this in a playful, smiling, self-amused way, that creates this electric attraction. It's really, really powerful. Girls just love wickedness. They are devoted to wickedness. They are loyal only to wickedness at the end of the day. Now, you can also amplify this vibe with playfully evil jokes, plotline stories. You know, I often tell girls I'm a serial killer, or that I'm a Satanist, or I might tell them I'm a professional black magician. You know, I put curses on people. I'm demonically possessed. And, you know, I'm not necessarily saying you should say these things. I say them because they amuse me. And the whole game here is self-amusement. That's what gives you that vibe that pulls girls in and makes them love you. A few other examples of self-amusing evil lines I've been using recently. You know, if the girl's in the middle of saying something, I sometimes interrupt her. I'll go, silence. Another one I like, I was talking to this girl recently about past relationships. I, said that how my longest relationship was for about 7 years. She goes, well, so what happened with your ex? I go, I had to kill her. Another one I've been playing with is telling girls I've been spending a lot of time researching how to use AI and robotics to bring Ted Bundy back to life. You know, Robo Bundy. We can rebuild him. We have the technology.
We can rebuild him better than he was before. Better, stronger, faster.
Another example is, when I'm joking with the girls about being a serial killer, she'll go like, so you kill people or something like that. And I go, I don't kill people. I set them free. Another one I like using, while kind of smiling in a kind of innocent way, I'll go, have you ever been choked with a belt while having sex? And she's like, no, why? I'm just going, no reason. And these are all just examples of little jokes and evil plot lines that amuse me. Again, you don't necessarily need to say any of these things to girls yourself, but the whole key to this vibe, and just really any vibe that attracts women in general, is it all boils down to self-amusement. Ultimately, that's what makes this work, because again, whatever you feel, she feels. So when this amuses you, when it gets you in the zone, when it puts a smile on your face, it's going to amuse her and put her in the zone as well, which is how she actually becomes attracted to you. Alright, so in this video, I talked about how to cultivate the kind of aura and magnetism that makes you really, really attractive and irresistible to young, hot women. But like all my videos, this is really just touching the surface of one little theme or idea. If you want me to show you my full system, step by step, of how I get almost any woman I want into bed, how I meet girls, turn them into my girlfriends right away, how I convince women to be my buddies, then you need to get my full program, the Girlfriend Button. This is a program I devoted 5 months to building for you. I wanted to make it as comprehensive as possible. And the big advantage of having a system as opposed to just watching different random videos here and there is you're going to know exactly what to do and say at every single step of the process, from the moment you meet the girl to the point where she's your loyal girlfriend or your buddy. So there's no more, oh, she ghosted me, or she lost attraction, or I ran out of things to say. I show you how to prevent all these problems and more inside the Girlfriend Button. And I've even included a full 7-page cheat sheet of the exact magic words, lines, texts, and phrases I've used to seduce girls like these. These are all real girls I personally met and dated using this system. These are not pictures I just found online somewhere. Every single girl here was a serious girlfriend of mine for at least several years. And the context here you need to understand is I am not not a good looking guy. I've got a big, ugly hook nose, a weak chin, acne scars, receding hairline. I'm not anyone's idea of a hunk, but I am consistently able to pull girls who are way out of my league. And the way I do it, and I'm not fucking joking here, I do it using one little text, just one text. Really, I know it sounds insane, but I am not even bullshitting you. I just send this one simple text to every girl I match with online or whose number I get, and she ends up in my bed virtually every time. Almost always within days, sometimes even just in a matter of hours. If you want to see how I do this and you want to learn this one magic text, watch the video I linked for you in the description below right fucking now. When you click that link, it will open up a new page on my own website where you'll be able to watch the special private video I put together for you there. This is somewhat sexually explicit, which is why I can't post it here on YouTube. But in that video, and only in that video, I'm going to teach you the secret of this 12-word text that gets any girl naked in your arms in bed within just days of meeting her. And this will work for you. I don't care who the fuck you are. I don't care what kind of Quasimodo freak or monster you look like. Attraction is attraction. There are certain core things that women are attracted to in men, and it doesn't matter what you look like. Again, it all ties back to evolution. Did being a pretty boy help you survive in evolution as a man? Fuck no. In caveman times, being pretty only helped you survive if you were a girl because guys wanted to fuck you and so they didn't kill you. The only way that being a little Justin Bieber pretty boy helped you survive as a man in caveman times is if bigger, larger alpha males wanted to keep you around so they could fuck you in the ass. Ouch! Other than that, being pretty, being good looking didn't do shit for you to help you survive as a man in evolution. Hence why women are evolved to not give a fuck about your looks. All they care about is your behaviors. The behaviors that show whether you're an alpha male or not, whether you're that fucking shark or not, whether you're a winner. So click the link in the description now and learn how to be a shark, not a fat. Once again, when you click that link below and watch the video, I'm going to reveal the number one secret to never be ghosted by a beautiful woman again. How to always get her back. Never be flaked on again. And how to have any girl you want go from hating you or being indifferent to you to loving you, being obsessed with you, and getting down on her knees butt naked and begging to be your girlfriend. So look, I'm going to level with you here. If you watch my videos here on YouTube, but you don't get the girlfriend button, you're wasting your fucking time. Get the system. Learn how to do this step by step in detail. Learn all the little tricks, all the little nuances to this. Stop being a dabbler. Stop being an amateur. Stop wasting your own fucking time. Click that link now and get the fuck out of my office.